Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Have you ever found yourself wondering, is there something subtle, maybe a hidden edge for those really elite NFL running backs? Beyond just speed and power. Like specifically, does a physical trait like height actually make a difference in how they perform, especially maybe for your fantasy team? Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. We're looking at a big analysis trying to figure out if a running back's height genuinely impacts their numbers.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a casual glance. The source really dug in. They looked at the top 50 fantasy football finishers, PPR scoring, every single year since 2003. They use the official NFL Draft Combine numbers for height, so it's consistent data.
Okay, top 50. And they needed a baseline, right?
So they defined the bottom 10. That's the guys finishing, 41st through 50th each year in fantasy points. That gives us something to compare against.
Gotcha. So our mission here is to unpack what they found, maybe bust some myths. We want to give you some real insights, or at least, something interesting to think about for your next fantasy draft. Okay, so let's jump right in. The first thing that kind of jumps out from the source, it's pretty intriguing. They found that the top 5 fantasy finishers, they were consistently taller than those bottom 10 guys.
Yeah, that's right.
And not just, sometimes it was for like 71.4% of the season since 2003. That feels significant, doesn't it?
It does initially, yeah. And what's fascinating is that the study zeroed in on, a critical height range where this trend was most obvious.
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting abilities so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance, and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
Between 6 foot 0.5 inches and 6 foot 1.875 inches. Maybe call it the taller RB sweet spot, just to keep it simple. And in that specific range, that's where they saw the most consistent high-level production increases.
Right. So how did that compare between the groups?
Well, think about those bottom 10 running backs, the 41st to 50th place guys. Only about 14.8% of them, that's 31 guys out of 210 studied, actually fell into that specific taller range.
Okay, 14.8% for the bottom group. That seems low.
It is. But then look at the top 10 finishers, the elite guys.
Yeah.
Suddenly, 25.7%, 54 out of the 210 top RBs were in that exact same height range.
Wow. Okay, so 14.8% for the bottom, 25.7% for the top. That's what? Almost an 11% jump.
Exactly. A 10.9% increase. Pretty substantial difference when you compare the very top performers to the guys just cracking the top 50.
What's that gap telling us?
Well, it strongly suggests we're looking at an average height that's more typical of top performing backs, not just the average running back across the league.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's always a but, isn't there?
Yeah, usually. And here it is. Despite seeing that trend in the percentages, the study also ran standard statistical tests. Looking for a direct correlation. Does height directly predict fantasy points? And the Pearson value, which measures that correlation, was really low, only 0.057.
0.057. What does that mean in practical terms?
It basically means there's no strong statistical link. For world-class athletes, you typically hope for at least, say, 0.1 or negative 0.1 to say it matters. This 0.057 is very close to zero, meaning height alone isn't really driving fantasy points in a predictable, linear way.
So how does that compare to something we know matters, like draft position?
Great question. Draft capital for running backs, which everyone agrees is important for opportunity and predicting success. That has a Pearson value of negative 0.234. See, that's much further from zero. It shows a real acknowledged relationship. Height at 0.057 just doesn't have that same statistical punch on its own.
Okay, so the direct math says, but the trend of top guys falling into that height range is noticeable. How do we square that?
Well, the study also looked at timing. Looking at the time trends, there was the source called it a glaring 18% increase in guys hitting that sweet spot height when comparing the bottom 10 to the top 10 finishers, just in the most recent decade analyzed.
Yeah.
Now, compare that to the decade before, 2004 to 2013, where the increase was only about 7%.
So this taller running back sweet spot, while maybe not a direct cause overall based on the low correlation, it seems to be a much more prominent feature of top performers lately, a recent trend.
Exactly. So just to kind of summarize it for you listening, yes, that specific height range between 6 foot 0.5 inches and 6 foot 1.875 inches did show up 10.9% more often in the top 10 guys versus the bottom 10. But the overall direct statistical link between height and points is weak. It's not really a standalone predictor. And the source was really clear on the takeaway here. The recommendation is definitely not to use height as your main scouting tool for fantasy. That low correlation value is key.
It's more like an interesting observation than a rule then.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a data point, maybe a subtle factor, but not something to hang your hat on for your draft board.
Okay, so what this could mean for your strategy then is, look, height by itself isn't the magic bullet, but if you're looking at a running back, maybe deciding between two guys and one falls into the sweet spot height range, especially if they're already projected highly, well, that could be that little extra data point, that small edge, that 10.9% higher chance of cracking the top 10 compared to similar guys outside the range. In those tight fantasy leagues, maybe that's the tiebreaker you need.
It's a nuanced factor for sure.
So, given all this, we see a trend in a specific height range, especially recently, but the stats say there's no strong direct link overall. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other subtle trends, maybe things just emerging, might be influencing performance in sports that the simple stats haven't quite caught yet? Or maybe they need a deeper look than just correlation, something to chew on before your next draft.